I heard. Okay, welcome, folks.
Good evening.
Welcome, everybody. I think someone's at the front door. Thank you. Nice picture. Yeah. All right, we have David with us, Coy, Tim. Yeah, he's hiding. We have Michael and Andrew. Who else is with us here? Chava, Alan, Davida. They can not at the moment, but here, 1 second. They could see you. Here we go. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, 1 second. They can't see you because for some reason, my there we go. Oh, they can.
Hello.
Hello.
There we go.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We will have the camera.
Oh, the Rabbi's there.
Yeah. You're in good company. You're in good company. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro.
Amen. Amen.
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. So today's learning in honor of all of those that need to be redeemed from hostage, being as a hostage, all those that need a refuah shlema, need a speedy recovery, and for my cousin Avraham ben Zev, his neshama should go from strength to strength, and for who just passed away, Phyllis, Sharon's Phyllis, and for Raymond, I just said Kaddish for, right on the and for all those that need a refuah shlema, speedy recovery. All right. L'chaim. So, what's our attachment to the Holy Land of Israel? Begins in this week's Torah portion, actually, right? It begins. There's a double promise. There's actually more than two promises, but two promises that we're going to focus in on, which I realize. Give me a moment. While we share over here, I just realized. No. All right. I'm sorry. Didn't get this properly set up. Yeah. There we go. All right. Here's our PowerPoint. You see it? You see it. Does everybody see it online? Yeah.
No.
No, Rabbi,
You
we
see
do
it?
not see
No.
No.
Nothing.
Okay. Now you should see it. We're good?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Here we are. This week's Parsha. Hashem says to Oh man, there we go. Let's move that over here, out of the way. And God appeared to Abraham and said, I will give this land to your children. All right, this week's Parsha. And again, in this week's Parsha, later on, it says, and God told to him, I am God who took you from Ur Kasdim to grant you this land as an inheritance. So what are the differences between the two verses? Let's go back and forth. Here's God appeared to Abram and he said, I will give this land to your children. And God told him, I am God who took you from Ur Kasdim to grant you this land as an inheritance. What's the difference between the two verses?
Well, this one says God took him out.
Took him from somewhere, right? Okay, first difference. The second verse says he was taken from somewhere, from Ur Kasdim. And the first verse doesn't mention that. Okay? What other differences there?
One is I will give this land to your children, and the other one is I will give this land as your inheritance
To you.
to you. Yeah.
So the first difference is that I will give this land to your children is the first verse. The second verse, I'm giving it to you.
Give and grant.
Speak about the children, right? Sorry?
Give and grant.
Given.
Giving something as opposed to granting. I think
Okay.
granting is more of an inheritance.
So the first verse, what does it say? I'm giving, meaning, what do you call that? A
A
gift.
gift.
The first verse speaks about giving Israel as a gift. The second one speaks about it as a, clearly, what does it say? An inheritance, right? As an inheritance, right? So those are the three differences. First verse is speaking to all the children of Israel as a first. The second one is to Abraham. First verse is not speaking about where he's taken from. The second one is he's taken from Ur Kasdim. The first one is it's a gift, and the second one is an inheritance. Okay, so this is what the Rogatchover Goin says. God had previously promised to give Israel to Abraham as a gift. However, the second promise refers to the second conquering of Israel, which was an inheritance. So we have like this. Joshua, he entered into the land of Israel, or Canaan, at that time, in 1273 before the Common Era, right? That's almost, it's almost 3,300 years ago. Right? He entered the land, conquered it from the Canaanites. They were there for how many years? Anybody know? On the land? 850 years approximately, just under 850 years, until they were exiled. Who exiled them the first time? The Babylonians. Exactly. So they were in exile for 70 years, and then they came back in the year 350 before the Common Era, and they were there for another 420 years, until they were then exiled by Rome, by the Roman Empire, in the year 70 of the Common Era. That was the second, right? So what the Rogatchover is saying, that when God promised it as a gift was to Joshua on entering into the land the first time, right? And it became an inheritance when the Jews came back the second time. Okay? Is that clear? Which, by the way, this is what the Rogatchover explains. Not all commentary, there's many different commentators and explaining in different manners. We're going with one path in how the Rebbe explains in this week's Sikha, right? It's just that you should be aware that if you're looking up in commentators, you might get other understandings. But we're taking one path based on the teachings of the Rogatchover. Okay, is that clear? Which is, when you think about it, pretty radical suggestion that there's a distinction between the first and the second time. And there's a distinction between being a gift versus an inheritance, right? We need to understand that. But you could understand it. Sorry, Helen?
Yes and no, because an inheritance always has a different timeline. Inheritance, in my mind, always seems much later. It's not right away. I mean, that's just.
Okay, well, we'll get into, we're going to get into the distinction in a moment, but what is the halachic ramification, the distinction between them? That's what is the most important thing, is right? Is what, in other words, when we're saying it's a gift and it's an inheritance, the land, so there's it's bound by halachic boundaries and definitions. So we, of course, and we need to know what that is, right? But the clear point over here is that we're making a distinction in the timeline and chronological of gift, and then it's going to become an inheritance, right? And those are the two times that we went into the land, and we were, right, as God told us to go into the land. Now, when we went 75 years ago, that's a whole different topic. We're not going to get into that, right? That's a whole different issue, but that's not for the moment, right? So this idea of gift and inheritance and the distinction between the two verses. So when Abraham was told about what he's going to get for his descendants, he also was told that they're going to come with a lot of suffering, that there will be an exile. In other words, God's telling him, I'm giving you this, but at the same time recognize that there will be exile, there will be suffering. And what sort of calmed him is the fact that afterwards it becomes an inheritance. So what does that mean? What does it mean, the distinction that first it's a gift and then it's an inheritance, right? We need to understand that. So, who can explain to me the difference between a gift and an inheritance? Sharon.
You get a present, you're so happy to get a present. Doesn't mean you're gonna like it when you see what it is, but you're happy to get it. It's a gift. But then when it's an inheritance, it's rightfully yours. You have to respect and appreciate it and treat it accordingly.
Excellent. Good. Excellent. What else? What other distinctions?
Well, gifts, usually you don't have to fight for. An inheritance, sometimes you can inherit something, but it can be yours, but you still have to fight for it.
Okay.
Like, yeah. Like,
Okay.
your dog is stupid.
The beneficiary takes by operation of law.
So 1 second, Andrew.
Like an
A
inheritance.
beneficiary takes by operation of law. When somebody passes and you're a
Yeah.
beneficiary of the will, it works by operation of law. If I'm giving it to you, that has no legal passing other than I'm just giving you something now. You're
Okay.
alive when you're giving it.
Excellent. Sorry, Henry. Yeah, excellent.
Typically, when I think of inheritance, it requires the condition to be met that like the person you're inheriting it from has died.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, otherwise it's not an inheritance, right? There has to be a passing, absolutely. I think that's a prerequisite for an inheritance to exist, absolutely. Moish?
Same thing.
So let's strip it down to a little more basic. A gift is based on the giver. The recipient has no connection to the gift until the giver is giving it. It's totally based on the giver. Has nothing to do with the recipient. I mean, can be a relationship, cannot be a relationship, right? It's totally based on the whim and the desire. So, for example, halachically, if I were to say that I'm gifting you this for the next week, But after that, it's being gifted to Moish for the week after that, and after that to Fabrice, right? And all the way down, I have the right to do that. Because it's all based on the giver, right? It's all based on that. Does that make sense? But that's not how an inheritance works. Inheritance is as follows. The Talmud tells us, if one may stipulate my inheritance goes to you, and after your passing, it will transfer to another. If the first recipient is a legitimate heir, has to be a legitimate heir, the second party receives nothing. This is not a gift, it's an inheritance. And inheritance has no end, right? So the gift, I can gift it with stipulation. Inheritance is no stipulation. If you're the inheritor, you get it completely, whatever you're inheriting. It could be part of the estate, but whatever is the inheritance is yours without stipulation, period. You can't make stipulation. Otherwise, it's not an inheritance. Then it's a gift. Then it's the law of gift, not the law of inheritance. So if you're writing your will and I'm gifting this to you and then to you and or to one child, next child, and so on, then that's not the law of inheritance. That's the law of gifting. And that law, by the way, you have to do in your lifetime. You can't do it afterwards, because you can't give something when you're not here. But in inheritance, you can, right? That's the whole point of an inheritance. Is that clear, that distinction? So this is going to give us now a little understanding of the distinction between the first time and the second time. What was the first time? Who conquered? Who conquered that we got it as a gift? Yeshua, right? And second time was the second holy temple. So the Rambam tells us the following: all the lands that the Jews came to possess when they ascended to Israel from Egypt became sacred. This was Israel's first sanctification. When they were exiled from Israel, the sanctity of these lands expired. This is because the lands became holy via conquest. Therefore, the consecration was only effective for the duration of the conquest, not for all time. As the law of the world is, and the law Torah is telling us, conquer or be conquered. If once you conquer, it's yours. But if you're conquered, then it's no longer yours in sacredity. We'll explain that in a moment. What does that mean in sanctity? Talk about in sanctity. We'll see in a moment what that means, okay? By contrast, when the exiled Jews returned and took possession of the portions of the land, they consecrated it anew. This consecration was forever. For that time and for all time. So the first time God gave us a gift. A gift could be taken away. A gift could be taken away. But the second time it was given as an inheritance. Inheritance can't be taken away. That's what we just explained, the difference between gift and inheritance. No. Let's stay. No. If you inherit something, it's yours forevermore. Your heirs then can get it, right? But no one else has dibs on it. A gift can be with a stipulation. A gift can have limitations to it on what the gift is. An inheritance doesn't. That's what we just explained, right? Very plain and simple. Let's not complicate the issue. Is that clear? Right? Now, let's be very clear what we're talking about. We're talking about the sanctity of the land. We're not talking about ownership of the land. Ownership of the land and sanctity are two different things. Ownership, the land is ours from the time that God said to Abraham that this is your land. We have ownership. We took possession of the ownership and had sanctity to the land only when Joshua conquered the land. Now, what is the difference between ownership and sanctity? Or better yet, what does it mean, sanctity? What does it mean, sanctity? What's unique about the land of Israel that it has sanctity? How does that express itself in practical day-to-day living? Which ones?
I guess most, all of them.
No.
360.
Do we put tefillin on here? Yes.
The land in terms of like when you can't let stuff grow for like 7 years. In a row.
The sabbatical year is in the land of Israel. Tithing is in the land of Israel. Truma is in the land of Israel. All the agrarian things that are connected to the land, because there's sanctity, therefore you have to fulfill those mitzvahs.
Not because there's ownership.
Not because of ownership. Not because of ownership, because of sanctity. Okay, so ownership we have at all times. Sanctity, which means the unique mitzvahs that are related to the land. Again, taking the tithes from your produce, right? The sabbatical year, the jubilee year, right? These particular things are unique, right? Are unique because of the sanctity. So when the first temple was destroyed and the Jews went into exile, do we own the land? Is it ours? Absolutely. We just said ownership is ours from day one. That didn't change. Is there sanctity in the land that now we have the laws of tithing and so on? No, the sanctity ended with the first, right? Is that clear? Is that clear?
No Jews were made at all.
Wait, no, it's got nothing to do with Jews remaining or not. Jews remained. We're not talking about Jews being there or not being there. We're talking about sanctity in the land and the obligation to fulfill those mitzvahs biblically. Talking biblical law here, right? Is that clear? Yeah. When they came into the second holy temple, right? Came to the second holy temple. How do we get that land then? As an inheritance. So that means the sanctity is what?
It's forever.
Forever. That
The
happened
second
only in
one-
the second holy temple.
We conquered it too the second time.
Huh?
The second time we conquered it as well.
We didn't conquer it.
We did.
No, we took possession. We didn't conquer it. We took possession of what? Okay. Second time, forever, the sanctity is there. Is that clear? So, someone had a question or comments online?
The question I had is, without the
Sorry,
holy
Alan?
temple,
What?
without the holy temple,
What?
without the holy temple, how is the land sanctified today?
So first of all, there's a sabbatical year in Israel. There's the tithing and all those things are applicable. The truth is, there's a lot of other parameters that come with it, a lot of details that those laws that are there today are rabbinic in nature. Just because of the parameters of the law, but I don't want to get off on that, okay? But the sanctity potentially is there now, and it is not put the sanctity is there, not ownership always was. Sanctity is now there in an eternal manner. So therefore the laws, when we have the proper parameters for the laws to be fulfilled biblically, they would be enacted. As opposed to after the first destruction of the Holy Temple, they could not be. Difference between a gift that's temporary or could be temporary versus an inheritance that is permanent and eternal. Clear? Helen, I see confusion on your forehead. L'chaim.
If I'm-
Your forehead is very easy to read.
Could they not do the mitzvah? The mitzvah at the time of the destruction of the first temple, would that not still sanctify the land?
The land didn't have sanctity. But wait a second. Wait 1 second. Jewish law, is that like, is it like being Jewish, like bluish? Like it's a little blue, it's a little like this? Or is Jewish law firm in what you're obliged to do? So what you're obliged. So you could do it, not do it, or choose to do it. That's not Jewish law, right? Jewish law is, are you obliged? So after the destruction of the first temple, there was no obligation. Now you want to, could they do it? Well, there's rabbinic law, but that's, getting off the topic over here and, and so on. And again, we have the rabbinic law today. So there is that component, but that's not the issue over here because we want to remain with the point over here. We're talking about our connection to the land, right? We understand ownership was given immediately, right? Abraham's given him ownership. It's ours. That the ownership, by the way, can you own a property and not live there?
Yeah.
Yes, right? So we got ownership right away. Didn't live there right away. Took a long time till we got there. But the ownership we had, right? We only by the conquest is when we actually took residence, right? By Joshua. That was in a manner of a gift. To what? Gift, what was gifted? The sanctity of the land. It was a sanctity of the land. It was gifted then, not the ownership of the land, the sanctity of the land, right? And then with the second time that we came into the land, right, in the year 350 before the Common Era, right, we were then given as an inheritance the sanctity. It's eternal, period. Okay, we're good? I know I'm breaking your heads right now because you're making you like, difference between ownership and sanctity, between a gift and an inheritance. It's okay. You're gonna have to work for your water. Yes.
This sanctity is attached to the land.
Huh?
The sanctity is attached to the land or to the Jew?
To the land. We're talking sanctity of the land, not sanctity of the Jew. We're talking about the land, not about the Jew. Not about the Jew at all, we're talking about. Okay. All right. So let's understand this idea that the sanctity, when you think about it, it's very counterintuitive. You would think that the sanctity would be eternal. What do you mean? Like, what's going on over here? How do we understand that? How's that? Doesn't, that's why you're a little confused because you would think, you mean the land is, it doesn't mean, by the way, there's a difference between inherent holiness. So actually, there's another idea, and maybe I shouldn't say this. No, I'm not going to say it because it'll really throw you for a loop. Later, at the end of the class, if you are of mind, I will share a third dimension. Okay? Now we have two dimensions. What are they? Ownership and sanctity. Ownership and sanctity. And in sanctity, there's two dimensions. Okay? Which came over two time periods. Now the question is, of course, why? Why? Why does it have to be done that way? So we understand the difference. We understand there was a difference in time, but why didn't they come together? Gifted, inheritance, So we need to understand the distinction between the era of the first temple and the era of the second temple. Okay, and if we have a distinction and understanding between those two time periods, then we'll appreciate what we're talking about here. Okay, so when the Jewish people returned from being in exile, where were they in exile, by the way? Babylon, right? Modern day Iraq, Iran, right? They came back from that culture, a foreign culture, right? A pagan culture with, pagan influence. They were affected by being in that environment, right? So the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, he says the following. It is well known from the Talmud that most of the rabbinic decrees, stringencies, and precautionary restrictions were imposed during the Second Temple era. This is because the Jewish people were not completely free from the influence of their previous exile during this era. They remained under the rule of the foreign kings, as is well known. The restrictive rabbinic enactments were designed to guard against these unholy influences. This was not the case during the First Temple era. At that time, the other side, Sitra Achar, had no control or governance over the Jews. So in the First Temple, the rabbinic sages, Sanhedrin, did not enact that many things because it wasn't necessary, because the Jews were not prone to negativity. They were living in the Holy Land of Israel, right? They were there. They didn't have the outside influences. There was no Netflix. There was no social media, right? You don't know what that is. I know, because you're a soul from the First Temple. Sharon somehow got dropped in here, like she's oblivious to everything that's going on over there. She's a First Temple adherent.
But in the southern part of Israel, not northern Israel. Right?
Well, yeah, because they didn't last that long. So yeah,
Right, so this is like.
in the southern part, yes, Benjamin and Judah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
They were home, yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
The Second Temple, on the other hand, because of the negative influence that they had being in Babylon, right? So the rabbis had to come along, the sages had to come along, and they had to make enactments, right? They had to make a fence around the Torah, around the law. Why? Because a fence is ordered to keep you from transgressing and not stepping on something you shouldn't step upon, right? Is it like the law of muksa? What's muksa? Something they are on Shabbos not allowed to touch.
No purpose on Shabbat.
Why? It's a rabbinic law. In other words, I can't touch a hammer on Shabbos because I might go and now use it to hammer in a nail, and that would be a biblical law. If I'm going to take a nail and start building, that's a biblical law. I'd be transgressing. So the rabbis came and enacted, don't touch that hammer on Shabbos. Now, if the hammer's on your Shabbos table and you need it for the space there, so or a child's going to end up playing with it, so you can move the hammer, right? It's the parameter of the law is itself something we need to understand. But the basic idea, you can't do it. That was only enacted in the Second Holy Temple. Why? Because the people were less spiritually minded, aware of Shabbos, that they needed this fence around, that maybe if they did hold on to that hammer, they may, in fact, right? So they had to put away their phones, right? Everybody put away your phone, put it on whatchamacallit, on silent mode, or even better, on airplane mode, right? Put it on airplane mode, because we are in a very weak generation that when we hear a beep on the phone, it must be God sending me a message. And I must answer that.
That requires a very, very, very special phone. Right?
They're very special. Everybody has that special, what's called a smartphone. It's so smart that God's calling me, because who else would God call but me? He's so smart. Right? So we make a fence around the law, put it on airplane mode, because otherwise you hear the beep, you're tempted. Well, in the First Holy Temple, they weren't tempted by that, right? They weren't tempted by muksa. They didn't need the law of muksa that you might hold on to. So what is enacted? That was only in the Second Holy Temple, right? There's another example that the Alter Rebbe brings of a spiritual deterioration of the Jewish people, and therefore they had to enact something. And that is in the laws of prayer. Alter Rebbe writes, during the First Temple era, there was no daily prayer. No daily prayer, right? However, the more we decline spiritually, the more prayer we require, because of the searing passion of prayers removes our inner dross and attaches us to God. We need prayer. In the First Holy Temple, there was no service. You had the offerings in the temple, and whenever you needed God, the biblical law was you had to call on to him. That was your command of prayer. People felt the connection, and therefore they knew whenever they needed something, God was the address. So they connected to him. But in the Second Temple, people were more removed. And therefore they needed to enact the sages, the daily prayer. Therefore, during the First Temple era, when there was a scant spiritual decline, Jews did not require passionate prayer. Their sacrificial rites sufficed to remove the little dross that they had and to attach them to God. They had a vehicle on how to attach to God. They had their sacrifices. They had whenever they needed, and they felt the connection. During the Second Temple era, our sages began to introduce daily prayers. At that time, the prayers were relatively short in proportion to the degree of the flaming passion required to remove from their increased dross. In our day, we progressively increase our prayers and passion. In each generation, we pray with more passion. This is not because we are more pious than our predecessors. On the contrary, it is because each generation is increasingly infiltrated by spiritual dross. Thus, we require more powerful flame of prayer to cleanse ourselves spiritually. We are more affected by our surroundings now than ever before, right? We bring our surroundings with us. Used to be the surroundings was on the outside, all right? Now the surroundings are in the inside. So therefore, we need prayer now more than ever before. We need to have the spiritual awakening more than ever before. Not because we're holier, we're doing that. On the contrary, we're affected by the negativity on the outside much more. And therefore, we need prayer now much more than ever before. During the First Temple, though, the people were much more righteous. They were much more connected, right? They were always in a state of cleaving, of a state of cleaving. They were connected. So they didn't need the rabbis to come and say, hey, connect to God. They had it. Is that clear?
I have a question.
Yes.
Was it because of the level of godliness within them, or was it another factor thing?
Both. What's outside affects the inside, right? So what comes out is an interesting idea now. The First Temple is an expression more of righteousness of the people. The Second Temple is more about the turbulence, the struggles, and the difficulties, which brings out more the penitence about tshuva. The classic tzaddik versus the bal tshuva. So there's two ways to look at this idea, right? It's better to be the righteous because that means you've never tasted sin. You never tasted negativity. You're pure, you're innocent, unblemished, right? On the other hand, a penitent means someone who was struggled, who dealt with the negativity, dealt with the other side, and yet came through and was successful. That's what it means, repentance, right? And they better their relationship with God. So this is not a new argument. Maimonides, Rambam brings out this argument. Pious people follow the passions and inclinations. They behave meritoriously because that is what they want and yearn to do. Philosophers have agreed that the pious are more distinguished and complete than those who struggle to control themselves. Right? The righteous, they don't have they're not interested in pizza, not interested in ice cream, not interested in sushi. You wonder how, huh? They're not interested in it. They're not interested in any things that are not about attachment to God. They're beyond it, totally beyond it. Have no inclination. They have a one-track mind. They just want to connect and be connected to God. But Rambam continues, righteous people are in a constant state of unity and attachment to godliness. Their attachment from all forms of tactile pleasure and are certainly distant from evil and the like. In their worship, they are constantly aware of the divine light. They feel it is there in their souls, and they are moved by his eminence, God's presence, right? Okay, sounds really good. Sounds something maybe beyond us, right? So they're beyond the struggle. They don't even notice the struggle. They don't notice the sushi. They don't notice it. They just notice the godliness that's imminent in their lives. That's it. By contrast, what do you have? Who's a penitent? Someone who has turmoil from within. Someone who has struggles, the daily, perpetual. There's high points, there's low points, there's difficulties, right? There's temptations, there's natural inclinations that we have, failures that we have, obsessions that we have, and so on and so forth, right? However, even though it sounds thank you, sounds lesser, yet in 3 ways, the penitent is even greater. In 3 manners. How so?
Struggles.
Because the penitent is constantly struggling, as opposed to the righteous person who never experienced it, the struggle. As Maimonides himself says, as he continues, penitents should not consider themselves lower than the righteous on account of their sins and transgressions. This is not true. They are beloved and desirable before the Creator as if they had never sinned, as a penitent, right? As a penitent, not as a sinner, as someone who did tshuva, right? Thank you. L'chaim. Furthermore, says the Rambam, they will be greatly rewarded, for they have tasted sin and yet separated from it, conquering their urges. Our sages declare, where the penitent stands, even the completely righteous cannot stand. The penitent transcends those who never sin, for they overcame their evil inclination. So what do we have over here? The penitent is constantly struggling, right? In an effort to be connected. The righteous isn't struggling. They're there, right? They're there. They made the grade, right? They made the grade. So penitence is always on guard, constantly fighting, constantly knowing that there's negativity lurking inside of them, right? That they have to be always on guard. So Rambam concludes and says, when we examine the words of our sages on this matter, we found that those who feel the allure of sin are more distinguished and complete than those who don't desire it. This is true to the extent that they said that the reward of those who control their urges is commensurate with the degree of the struggle. And they said, in accordance with the effort, is a reward. So they're constantly struggling. So it's according to the effort. Their effort is much greater. The righteous doesn't. When that phone bings, there's a ping on the phone, the righteous don't notice it. They're oblivious to it, right? We notice it. We struggle with it, right? Again, thinking God's calling me because I'm his, chosen one. Right? And, so we overcome that urge. That's a victory. The righteous don't have that victory. They don't have that struggle, right? In that respect, there's something greater in the one who's struggling, right? But that's in the struggle. Now, there's a second point why the penitent has something greater than the one who's righteous. And what is that? Because of the constant struggle, we know what it means to be separated and distant when we do something wrong, right? We know ourselves that in human relations, with a loved one, when you do something and that creates a distance, sin creates that distance, right? You do something wrong to a loved one, we know what that feels, that distance. Because we have that feeling, and now the penitent, that propels the penitent now to become even closer as a result. It propels you even greater as a result of the sin, right? In other words, it brings you to even a greater degree of trying to avoid because you were there. As one husband once said, I was once in the doghouse.
Only once?
I said,
Never came out.
that's only because you're not a penitent. If you're a penitent, you came out, right? As the Rabbi explains in this week's Lecha, if your Jewish lifestyle is detached from worldly engagement, if you never tested by the other side, tested by the other side, there's no certainty that you would pass a test should you ever be tested, right? You've never been there. How are you going to pass it? Think about it for a moment. If you were born in the lap of luxury, of wealth, and you have everything, how would you know how you would fare if you had nothing? You don't know. Like the righteous, they have everything. How would they know how they fare if they didn't have? They never were tested. They're beyond it. By the way, when we speak about righteous over here, we're talking about not the person righteous and not the person penitent. We're talking about a path of righteousness, a path of penitence. So the righteous could be a penitent too. So we'll understand more. Okay. Penitence is different. They start at the bottom and they work their way to the top. Therefore, even the worst character traits become conducive to holiness. The manifestation of godliness is in their lives is enduring. It is never interrupted, right? Because they were there. They know what it means to be in that bad place. So now that becomes something that propels them, therefore becomes conducive for holiness. Penitents already tangled with the allure of worldliness. Moreover, they even stumbled, God forbid, and dabbled in behaviors that transgresses God's will. Despite all this, they return to God, his Torah and his commandments. This demonstrates that the ethos of Torah and mitzvahs permeate them to the extent that they cannot be separated again from God. That bond with God is constant. It is without boundaries. In other words, not only does it propel it, but it means that negativity, right, became the source, right? In other words, there's nothing that cannot lead me to God. For the righteous, there's only one way you can lead to God.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. Right? That's the only way. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Here, the penitent from the negative, the bad thing, the sinful thing, got them there. Oh, wow.
Very cool.
So that's also some feature that is in the penitent, right? And then the third point is that means in that darkness, not only it propelled them to get there, that means there has to be some kind of godliness even in that darkness, because that's how it propelled them to get them there. Even the darkness is not devoid of God. Even your darkness in your dark moments is not devoid of God. Proof is because you could propel yourself from there and use it as a means to even get closer. So that means in that moment also has to be a connection, that God's even there in that moment. Means everything then encompasses the penitent.
Rabbi,
Yes.
how could the righteous become penitent? Like, how would that
Good question. Well, we'll continue. Let's finish this. So penitents are completely subsumed within God. This is because they fell and became entangled in the state of ego, darkness, and evil. Yet they nullified their ego and return from the dark to seek God with all of their hearts, and in complete penitence, they achieve complete transformation. So not only they have not, remember, they've struggled, the righteous don't. So, and there's a constant struggle. So there's something unique about that, right? Not only that, because of the dark place, you recognize how that darkness is a negative place. You don't want to be there. So that propels you to be careful not to go back there, right? That propels you to even now transform that darkness to use it as a vehicle to get even closer. So that's something unique about penitence, right? That's unique about penitence. Is that clear? Okay. Now, we're talking about a mode of service. We're not talking about a person, even though we use these terms for a Baal Tshuva and a righteous person for a person, but it's a mode of service. So the righteous could be penitent could do tshuva too. They're not doing tshuva from sin. You can do tshuva because the word tshuva means tashuv, to return to God. Tashuv hey, to return the hey in God's name. God's name has two heys. The latter hey in God's name of the tetragrammaton is the lower form of tshuva, which is from sin, to return the hay. I'm not going to go into this. It's 12 chapters in Tanya on this, right? So it's to return from our behavior. The latter hay in God's name is Malchus. Malchus in our soul is our behavior, thought, speech, and action that has been soiled. So we return the hay in God's name. But then the former hay is Bina, and Bina means awareness and knowledge, the knowledge of God and being connected to God through his teachings of Torah. So it's about a strive to not to be like the penitent who is transforming. So the righteous person can also be transformative. It won't be from darkness to light, but it'll be from this level to an infinitely greater level. But that's a whole discussion, 12 chapters, and we're not going to get off on that right now. So it can be there, okay? But the point over here is that we're making a distinction between the righteous, right, and the penitent. Let us sum it up. The righteous is, we are attached to God, as we learn in Deuteronomy, like a rope attaches us. We're attached with a rope. There's 613 strands of the rope, and each strand is another mitzvah that binds us, connects us to God, right? What happens if you severed the rope? You're disconnected. What even if you severed one strand, but you're less connected, but if you've severed it often, then you can rip the connection, right? That's what sin means, right? What does penitence mean? Tying the rope back together. What happens when you take a rope and you knot it and double knot it? It's stronger than it was originally. Hence, the penitent is even stronger in his relationship, as we just explained in the three areas how that can be, than the one who isn't a penitent, who's righteous. Is that clear? Right? So the righteous could be what's called lovers of God. Lovers of God is just like there's the lover and the object of the love. Two separate entities. A lover loves someone, there's the someone that's being loved. Right? Penitence is much greater than love. It's greater than love. Penitence comes from oneness. Love is not about oneness. Love is, I love you for whatever reason. There's the me, it's me and my feelings and my desire to bond. And then there's that who I'm bonding with, right? Two separate entities. Yeah, there's a coming together, right? But penitence is greater. Penitence is about a singularity. It's about a oneness. And that's why it achieves even a greater connection, the severed rope, and now you reconnect it, re-knot it, and the stronger the penitence is, the more the knots there are, the stronger is the attachment than it was originally. Okay? Is that clear?
How does this relate to the land?
Good question. Let's get there. Okay? So, the penitents have the deeper relationship with God on two accounts, because now they share a degree of oneness with God, right? And now they have no test that could break their connection with God, because they've been there and they've returned, right? The righteous, we don't know. They haven't been there. They haven't been there. Make sense?
Yes, Rabbi.
Right? These are the two elements that are a distinction between a gift and an inheritance. Please pay attention. Now's the time. More than ever. Okay. The recipient of the gift and the gift giver, what are they? Two separate entities, right? I'm gifting, I'm the giver, I'm gifting you, two separate entities, right? Okay, there's a bond that's created. It may be prompted by love, fine, but two separate entities. I know, Sharon, don't go to Yehupitz, okay? Because you're not going to get a ride back from there. You're going to have to do real tshuva from there. Right? By contrast, the heir and the one who is the inheritor, right? But the testator, right? They are like one. As in Jewish law, the inheritor stands in the stead of the inheritee. Is that clear?
So they're one in that way.
They're one in that way. The heir becomes the how do you pronounce it? Testator. Testator. As it were. It is therefore the position of Jewish law that the inheritance does not constitute a transference of ownership. Transference is, I have something, I'm gifting to you. Inheritance, it doesn't come from the one who passed on, it's not a transfer of ownership. He's not giving anything. It's automatic, becomes the inheritors, right? And a transference can only be when there's two separate entities. Inheritor and the inheritee are like one. One stands in the stead of the other. And in a sense, spiritually, when someone passes away, as I tell people, you become their hands and their feet. They're no longer here. They can't do the mitzvah anymore. But through you, they are, because they live on through you. They live on through you. Does anybody want coffee? You're making coffee? Anybody want coffee? That's it, just you? Okay. But you have the pods there. You can just make one. So I don't think you need more than, I don't think Sharon, anybody besides Sharon wants? Anybody else wants? No.
Can you wire me a cup?
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. What time are you going to be here?
I'm here.
If it's cold, no, please, we're not going off on topic, okay? We're not going off on topic, please. Please, Sharon. No, it's off topic. What's the government got to do with inheritance? Well, Sharon, pay attention to the point. We're talking about Jewish law here. We're not talking about the government. What's the government's got to do with the Jewish law of inheritance? Let's learn their class. Let's not go off, please. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Is that clear? Okay. So there's no two entities here. There's just one. Furthermore, the second point is a gift. If I'm gifting you, I can stipulate. Inheritance, there's no stipulation, right? There's no stipulation. If it's in the law of inheritance, you get what you get for perpetuity, right? It's yours forevermore. There is no stipulation. Again, you could stipulate in the inheritance who gets what, but what they're getting is forevermore, right? Whatever they're getting is forevermore. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Right? Let's get that clear over here. Okay, let's read this. A gift is defined as a transfer of property that is not compelled by law. Another way to put it, the recipient has no inherent right to the property. The property is acquired solely by the largesse of the bestower. This is the universal meaning of the term gift. The recipient's right flows from the gift. Prior to the gift, the recipient had no right or a claim to the property. This is clear as day. Now, even if it's not, now we come to the estate and inheritance. The term relates to the transfer of one's property to another upon one's passing. As it transfers to the heir, the estate flows from above to below. Before the passing, the heir has a vague encumbrance on the property. After the passing, the heir has an inherent right to the property. In other words, the property flows downstream. is why perhaps the Torah uses the word nachala, which is the cognate of nachal, stream, to describe an estate. Estates are like rivers who flow into the ocean, cannot be blocked. So once you're the inheritor, it flows to you directly. It's not a transference that could be blocked, that could make a stipulation to it, that could make parameters to what you're getting and to how long you're getting it. No, it is flow to you completely, that you become its sole owner or sole owner of it, right? Now, with this, now we can understand. We can understand our question. Why Israel only became an inheritance upon its ancestors in the second entry to the land is because when the ancestors came into Israel first, they came as righteous.
Right.
They were righteous. So how did God give them? A gift. Just like the righteous are gifted.
The righteousness.
With their righteousness, they have a special soul that they're gifted, that they can accomplish and become the righteous. And they're gifted that, you know why? Because they're a gift to the Jewish people, that they can now teach us the ways of God. So everything about them is about what they've been gifted. They haven't been gifted that. We don't get that gift. Only certain souls have that capability. It's a gift, right? But a gift has a parameter to it. And that's why the righteous, their whole point is ultimately is to be there for the people. That's why they were given that capability. Is that clear? So if it's gifted, well, the gifts can be taken away. So once we're conquered and we were exiled from the land, right? Because presumably, when you're righteous, what you assume, you will be forevermore righteous. But of course, God doesn't take away freedom of choice. So therefore, even though they were indeed righteous to come into the land, but freedom of choice remains. And in the end, they weren't. They sinned. So they lost the state, the qualification, or not qualification, the script, or the title, shall we say, if you will, of righteous. Therefore, they were sent away from the land. But initially, they're righteous. So a righteous is a gift. So therefore, they are only gifted the sanctity of the land, not ownership. Ownership was always, right? The sanctity was gifted, because what is righteousness is sanctity. That's a gift that's given to them in their soul. So now that's gifted to them in the land. But that gift can be taken away. And so it was. But then what happened? The Jews came back a second time. They returned as returnees. What's a returnee? Penitents. Returnees are penitents. Tshuva means to return, right? They came back compromised. That's what return. How they compromised? They're in Babylon. They picked up the darkness, the negativity there, right? Which meant now they had to struggle day in, day out with the struggle, right? So at this point, they demonstrated that they can deal with the struggle and be one with God. And that they are returning to God as a penitent is returning. And that struggle is constant. That struggle is taking the negativity that they came with and they're transforming it. And they're now creating it into an eternal inheritance and sanctity to the land. Which means to suggest that the sanctity will always be there, because we will always have the struggle, but we will succeed. We will succeed in our personal struggle, right? We will succeed. And therefore, it will never expire, the sanctity, not of the Jew, for sure not, but the sanctity of the land itself will never, right? It's immutable. It's permanent. Because now, because of the constant struggle, and that we brought the darkness with us from Babylon, and we struggle with it to transform it. So it becomes transformational in such a manner that in every manner, in every way, we have been there, done that, and we have remained loyal and connected. Yes, we've had our challenges and whatnot, but we remain loyal. That's the penitent, dealing with all circumstance, and yet we always come back. We always come back, and that is our time now. Folks,
Amen.
we know what's going on in Israel today. Oh my gosh. I think someone put it up on our Chabad Zikr in WhatsApp. I don't know. I remember who put, maybe Sharon, maybe you put it up. A mother tells her daughter, you know, those soldiers there are such wonderful soldiers. You know, I think you should go find yourself a husband from one of those amazing soldiers. The mother tells her religious daughter, he says, mother, that would have been good yesterday, because yesterday I could have been able to tell the difference between someone religious and not religious in the army. But today, everybody's wearing tzitzis, everybody's wearing a yarmulke, everybody is recognizing God's blessings of the Jewish people, everybody is celebrating their Jewishness, everybody's celebrating living as a Jew. I can't tell a difference between who's religious and not religious. And that's what's happening. The soul of the Jews on fire. What the evil doers, look what the evil has done. We never had such evil perpetrated upon the Jewish people in this extent of evil. Not in the numbers I'm talking about the quality of the evil is unique. Because that's the whole idea over here. Not that they're penitents. There's no penitence there. It's not possible. That this is Amalek that we're dealing with. And Amalek, there's no, not every human being is going to do tshuva. Every Jew will, but not every human being. Not every human being is going to do tshuva. But every Jew will. Why? Because that's the eternalness, the inheritance that we have given in our soul, that it's a part of us. And we see that today, that everyone in Israel is so bonded and connected. And what do they put? With a simcha, with a joy. Not a simcha because we're going to kill our enemy. No, they are the epitome of evil. They're the embodiment of evil, because their joy is in the killing and the slaughtering and the horrifics. That's what their simcha, their joy is. Our joy is in the joy of being a Jew, of doing a mitzvah, of dancing together before Shabbos as the troops dance together, of celebrating being a Jew and being connected with each other. The Jewish soul is on fire. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. And this is an expression of what's going on over here. And now we're going to transform, annihilate the darkness, because right? But where's that going to start? When we transform ourselves. And that's what the lesson is teaching us over here. It's not enough to be righteous, to do everything right. Today, what's happening is unbelievable. People are, and this is the idea of even the righteous can be penitent. In others, people are doing magnificent things beyond ever before, right? In their personal lives, collectively, for Am Yisrael, the things people are getting gear for the army, and they're taking the plane and traveling to Israel because that's the only way that they can get it there quick enough, and just dropping it off and then coming back. Or they're going there and just go and, let me do a favor and help out whatever it is that, that is needed and necessary. So this is the lesson over here, that there's an eternal sanctity that is now being revealed in the land and in the people that I don't think has ever been in this degree and this beauty. And with that, L'chaim, everybody. This is what's happening to the Jewish people. And by the way, we got a bunch of Montrealers that are on over here, but oops, how did that happen? Again. But we have our group, our chevra over here. Everybody is and
No.
welcome everybody else from around the world and around the block. And from around the block. Yeah, L'chaim, everybody, a good tavach. Don't forget, folks, this Friday night here. If you didn't sign up yet, please sign up before the rates go up. All right, thank you. TRC coming in 15 minutes.
What's up, everyone?
Shavua tov.
CRC.
TRC.
CRC. How do I tune into that, Rabbi?
Private message me.